What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning into another episode of the California Underground. Tonight, we're doing another proposition breakdown because we are several weeks away from Election Day. Cynthia, how many exact days are we away? I know you probably have a countdown going.
I do. It is exactly 25 days.
It's exactly 25 days, and it's going to come up really fast. So, like we did a couple weeks ago, we're going to do another proposition breakdown. We're going to do two propositions tonight. We're going to do Prop 30 and we're going to do Prop 1 because they're both, I would say Prop 1 is definitely more controversial than Prop 30, but Prop 30 is typical California raising your taxes for all the green stuff. And as always, I am referring to my handy dandy general election book, which at this point is now starting to get tattered and dirty and full of marks and highlights and all that stuff, which I suggest any political nerds out there also do as well is take the time, look at your general election book, and read about all this stuff. Read the arguments for, read the arguments against, and all that. And yeah, so first off, Cynthia, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Like we were speaking a little bit before we went live, very hectic day because we are 25 days out. So people that, work in politics, this is like, our moment to shine. It's the end of almost the end of an era. So very productive day, that's for sure. How are you doing?
Just living the dream, just keeping it going here in California. So let's start off. I would think we would start off with Prop 30, and then we'll go into Prop 1 because I think Prop 1 is definitely more controversial, and I think there's a lot more to say about Prop 1. Not that there's not much to say about Prop 30. There's a lot to say about Prop 30. But let's start
Absolutely.
with Prop 30. And I'll read you from some of this general election booklet. The title is, it provides funding for programs to reduce air pollution and prevent wildfires by increasing tax on personal income over $2 million. Summary, increases tax on personal income over $2 million by 1.75% for individuals and married couples. So if you're a married couple and you make over $2 million, that also counts, and allocates new tax revenues as follow. 45% for rebates and other incentives for zero emission vehicle purchases, and 35% for charging stations for zero emission vehicles, with at least half of this funded directed to low income households and communities, and 20% for wildfire prevention and suppression programs, with priority given to hiring and training firefighters. And a quick summary of the fiscal impact is increased state tax revenue ranging from $3.5 billion to $5 billion annually, with the new funding used to support zero emission vehicle programs. All right, let's go into a little bit more of the analysis. The state collects a tax on personal income earned within the state. They collect a lot of that. That is something California is very good at, is collecting a lot of tax on your personal income. Last year, the personal income tax raised over $130 billion in revenue. That number alone is pretty astounding, that it raised $130 billion. Most of the revenue helps pay for education, prisons, healthcare, drag queen story hours, gender reassignment surgeries. Sorry, the last two don't really count, but they do pay for that stuff. And then they go on to talk about the state has programs that promote zero emission vehicles, and they abbreviate it ZEV, which for the rest of this thing, I just keep seeing the word ZEV. So examples of ZEVs include electric cars and hydrogen fuel cell cars. The state requires ride-sharing companies such as Uber and Lyft to use an increasing number of ZEVs for their services. Now I just can't get ZEVs out of my mind. Now this is where it gets really interesting when it comes to taxes. And I'll just ask you right off the bat, Cynthia. When California implements a tax, do you think that tax ever goes away?
Absolutely, positively no.
Well, you would be wrong because according to Prop 30, there is a sunset clause on this tax so far.
Really? Interesting.
Beginning January, I know, you're probably shocked, but I could understand your apprehension. Beginning January 2023, Prop 30 requires taxpayers, blah, blah, blah. We all know that. This additional tax would end by January of 2043. So it would automatically go away in 20 years. So it's not forever. They just want to do it to get us off the ground with our ZEVs. And once everyone is driving around in their new shiny ZEVs and we can charge our ZEVs, they're going to drop it. There's also an incentive. The tax could end several years earlier if California is able to drop its statewide greenhouse gas emissions below certain levels before then. So if we're all good little boys and girls and we all run out and get ZEVs as fast as possible, that tax could end faster than we anticipate. So like I said, do you think this tax would ever go away, or do you think they would keep extending it?
Like, we should believe anything that California state government actually does.
It'd be like saying, well, we're only going to spend this many billions on the high speed rail, and I promise we're going to get it done in the next 10 years. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
So let's see the breakdown of the revenue for where all this money is going to go, all these billions of dollars. Payments to help buy new ZEVs. Most of this money would be used to help households, businesses, and governments pay for part of the cost of new passenger ZEVs, such as cars, vans, and pickup trucks. The money would be used to install and operate ZEV charging and fueling stations at places such as apartment buildings, single-family homes, and public locations. For each category above, at least half of the money must be spent on projects that benefit people who live in or near heavily polluted and or low-income communities. Because the first thing that I always think of if I am driving through a low-income community is, good golly, they have a lot of Teslas and Chevy Leafs or Bolts or whatever is the Chevy version of it. That seems odd because I don't think a lot of people could afford in low-income communities fancy ZEVs. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
So I don't know where that money's going to go or what it's going to be spent on in those neighborhoods, but that's where half the money is going to go. Is it's going to go to low-income neighborhoods. So there's more ZEVs in those neighborhoods. Now, this was interesting because there is the whole mandate about we have to get rid of gas-powered cars. Everyone knows about that. They break down what happens if the state approves this mandate and what if it does not approve the mandate. It says if the state approves the ZEV mandate, then the additional funding from the proposition to help buy new ZEVs would not have much effect on the total number of ZEVs driven in California. Let me say that again. If a state approves the mandate that you don't have to, or that we have to get rid of gas-powered cars, the proposition to help buy new ZEVs would not have much effect on the total number of ZEVs driven in California. This is because the ZEV mandate would already require a significant increase in the number of ZEV sales, even without the additional spending. So, if there is a mandate and we're all required to buy electric cars in 10 years, they're saying this won't really have any effect, which makes me wonder, then what's the point of having this proposition? If the mandate's already going to go through and we're all going to be forced to be buying electric cars, then what's the point of this specific proposition? Instead, if the state does approve the ZEV mandate, then the funding from the proposition to help buy new ZEVs would increase the number of ZEVs and decrease the number of gasoline or diesel-powered vehicles driven in California. As a result, the amount of gasoline used would be less. Yes, if there are more electric cars, there would be less gasoline. That is a logical statement. This is a good one. Decrease state revenue for other activities. Some taxpayers probably would take steps to reduce the amount of income taxes they owe. Correct. Yes. When you raise taxes on people, usually what those people do who are worth or make over $2 million a year, they're usually smart enough to go to their financial planner and go, what are some tools and things that I can do to not pay as much in taxes? And usually financial planners and tax attorneys are very good at saying there's a whole bunch of things you can do to stop paying taxes. This would reduce existing state revenues used to pay for activities not funded by Proposition 30. The degree to which would happen and how much the revenue state might lose as a result is unknown. Are you ready for arguments?
Let's do it.
All right. Argument in favor of Prop 30. Fire season is now year round. The air quality in California is the worst in the country. Now, I thought we got much better, if I remember. Didn't LA used to have like enormous amounts of smog over it, like all that yellow smog and everything? And now it's gotten a lot better. I don't know. I don't go up to LA pretty much at all. But hasn't the air quality gotten a little bit better in California? And it's still the worst in the country for all the things that we do, all the green policies we have. This is still the worst air quality in the entire country. Existing programs are not enough to address this growing threat to California's economy, environment, and public health. We must act urgently to reduce the top two sources of air pollution, greenhouse gases, wildfires, and vehicles. And they say only the wealthiest 0.2% will be impacted. Small business revenue is not taxed. Gas is too expensive. Consumers want options, but many can't afford an electric vehicle. Prop 30 provides direct rebates and financial assistance for consumers. And it says it's going to expand infrastructure. Prop 30 develops a network of affordable charging stations throughout the state that we need, creating thousands of good paying green jobs. Thousands. Because when the government creates a job, it's always good paying. The measure will upgrade the electric grid to ensure reliability as we transition to more electric vehicles. Now, we read through this whole thing. I don't see anything talking about the electrical grid. And that's something that does concern me, is that really not a lot of this says how they're going to actually pump electricity into any of these communities, any of these homes to actually power up these cars. So
Yeah.
they're going to take billions and billions and billions of dollars, give that money back to people so you can go out and buy a ZEV. And then there's going to be charging stations that everyone's going to have to rush to charge. But where does the electricity come from? Let's see. Argument against Prop 30. Californians already pay the highest state income taxes and highest gas taxes, one of the highest sales tax, and grapple daily with among the highest costs of living in the nation. Prop 30 will be the largest tax increase in California over a decade as utility rates skyrocket for homeowners and small businesses, and higher taxes get passed on to consumers. Prop 30 would add up to 3 million new zero-emission vehicles in California over the next 10 years, which means the state would need to increase the current capacity of electricity grid to handle this massive increase. This expense is not included in Prop 30 and could be paid for by regular utility ratepayers who already pay some of the highest in the nation. Utility costs could skyrocket and ratepayers could pay as much higher electricity bills each month. The state budget surplus grew by $97.5 billion this year. The state has already developed the spending plan to ensure the rapid adoption of zero-emission vehicles without raising taxes and without threatening the stability of the electricity grid, and has already budgeted $10 billion to achieve these goals. So that's the argument against. Obviously, it's the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. They are against it. Small Business Association. So what are your thoughts, Cynthia, on Prop 30? Do you think it's a good idea, or do you think you would vote no? Or yeah, well, how would you vote on Prop 30?
Yeah, so full disclosure, if you guys follow me on Instagram, it's Create with Sin. I was requested by my community to do a voter guide, so I did post how I would vote for the statewide propositions. So full disclosure, I am voting no on all of them, so including Prop 30. So right off the bat, I have a very easy rule. Whenever I see climate crisis, I throw out the red flag emoji. I just don't believe in that. I do think Republicans can do better as far as branding and messaging and wanting to conserve and protect and do good things for the environment. But and then also too, from a financial standpoint, I don't necessarily agree with, taxing people who are wealthy, who, did what they need to do to be able to work for everything that they have. So all that being said, from the financial standpoint and what I think, how we can improve the environment, the language of the proposition, and also to like how they're committing to, wildfires. I mean, the Republicans in the state assembly have provided, opportunities on where we can improve that. Um, there's just a lot of different things that, I'm against as far as like the climate angle, the financial standpoint, what they're hoping to accomplish with this. Um, I think also too, before, because I'd like to hear your take as well, Phil. I think so. You also mentioned some of the supporters and opponents. I think people would be very intrigued because I know I was giggling when you're reading, who was against it. I was kind of waiting to see if you would say, who else would be against it. So the supporters, Representative Ro Khanna, Barbara Lee, State Assemblyman Kevin McCarty, one of our favorites, Assemblywoman Buffy Wicks, Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf. The California Democrat Party supports it. Lyft, the corporation, supports it. For the unions, Cal Fire, California State Association of Electrical Workers unit here, they're more left leaning. The American Lung Association, the California Environmental Voters organizations that support it. Tom Steyer, he supports it. The people that oppose it shouldn't be no surprise. So for political parties like the Republican Party of California, the Peace and Freedom Party, this is where it gets interesting. The organizations, so as you mentioned, Phil, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association, that shouldn't surprise people, like these business organizations, Chamber of Commerce. A union that's actually against it is the California Teachers Association, so CTA. And my favorite is Governor Gavin Newsom is against it. And I'm going to read this quote. It's on Ballotpedia. So if people would like to read it for themselves, they are more than free to do so. Governor Gavin Newsom said this. He's against it because Prop 30 is a special interest carve out. And yes, he said special interest. The man that's funded by special interest. He said
The man
Prop
who
30 is
lives
a
off
special
special interest.
Yeah. He said Prop 30 is a special interest carve out, a cynical scheme devised by a single corporation to funnel state income tax revenue to their company. Californians should know that just this year, our state committed $10 billion for electric vehicles and their infrastructure. So, all that being said, to sum it up, those are people and that are against or support it. I have my own reasons from a financial and a environmental standpoint. I just think there's a lot of things we could do with this. Other solutions out there to combat our environment and our forest management, because that's really what it is. It's when we talk about wildfires, it's about managing our forests. So I'm voting no.
Yeah, it's interesting to think that you actually are on the same side as Gavin Newsom, right?
Yeah, it's wild. I busted my butt off to try to recall him, like gung ho, like trained volunteers, gathered signatures, helped people phone bank and door knock, and I am on the same side for once. It's wild. Never would have thought that. 1 year later, a lot can
Well,
happen in a year.
Well, he's going to pop up. We're going to discuss him a lot in this episode, which is why I wore my noodle shirt. But yeah, it's I think it's interesting that he is against it. The California Democratic Party is for it. So sometimes it does seem like Newsom is out of step with the California Democratic Party. And not to go down the rabbit hole that we've talked about before, but I do think you're going to see a lot more of Gavin Newsom out of step with the California Democratic Party because he is going to try and run for governor, probably sooner rather than later. For all of those who are watching, for all those who are watching or listening, I'm sorry if you lost your dinner right now just thinking about that. But I think that you're going to see a lot of that coming up pretty soon. It's interesting. The California Democratic Party is just saying, yeah, we support this. But of course they support it because it's all about green energy and it's all about everyone driving their ZEVs and their sexy new ZEVs. But yeah, and him coming out against it, his reasoning is pretty much what the Howard Jarvis Association said, which is there's already been $10 billion put aside for all of this, so why continue to tax more? And if you do look at who does benefit the most, it is most likely going to be these big corporations like Lyft and Uber, because they'll be able to get more rebates, and people will be able, like the drivers will be able to get rebates and paid off to get these cars. Um, and therefore, Lyft and Uber don't really have to lift a finger because they can say, well, go apply for this program. California's giving out billions of dollars to buy these new ZEVs. Um, so therefore, Uber and Lyft aren't really on the hook. So I could see, in a way, I could actually agree. And oh my God, I just threw up a little bit in my mouth. I could actually agree with Gavin Newsom a little bit that it is sort of a big handout to Lyft and Uber because they're going to get off the hook if we end up giving them billions of dollars to do this. So it is sometimes weird how you and people end up on the same aisle on stuff. And yeah, anything with taxes in it, I'm pretty much always a hard no. Once I see it raises taxes, I'm like, nope,
Red
it's an
flag, red
automatic
flag.
no for me. Red flag, red flag. That's a no for me. But there has been some polling on Prop 30, and this was as of last week, October 4th. And it says, oh no, let's see. I'm trying to find the right. A new poll released on Monday has shown that while Prop 30 continues to enjoy a double digit advantage in terms of support percentage amongst voters, that support has dwindled from earlier polls, with total support coming under the 50% mark for the first time. Um, According to the new UC Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies poll released on Monday, support for Proposition 30 is currently at 49%, with those opposing it currently sitting at 37% and 15% undecided. So if those 15%, it depends on how they break. If they all break against it, then it won't pass. But there's probably going to be a split of people who don't know what to do, and they're probably going to be like a 60-40 split. Split amongst party preference, 69% of Democrats favor yes. Of course, there's never a tax Democrats don't like, while only 15% of Republicans, okay, which 15% of Republicans are actually supporting this? I want to know, and I want to have a nice chat with them about why you would support this. And 49% of both no party preference and other parties were in favor. Broken down by age, those 39 or younger had an above 50% level support, with older groups trending more and more below that mark. It's easy to see the real split on Prop 30, explained Elise Castro, a ballot issue advisor to the Globe, on Tuesday. A lot of people, especially younger people, want the rich taxed more because they think that they need to pay their more fair share. At the same time, the way it's being presented as a tax on the rich to help make it better for electric cars and such has a lot of support. But in recent weeks, many are questioning Prop 30 more and more. Some of it has to do with people not liking Lyft, seeing this as a huge money saver on their part, and others becoming more aware of electrical grid stresses after recent heat waves. I mean, millions of Californians got text messages warning them to turn off power. Now there is that only will increase electrical usage. So it's interesting. The polling is trending down for Prop 30. And I wonder how much of it has to do with Noodles coming out and having ads that say, vote no on Prop 30. I think that probably has a big effect. If Noodles is coming out and saying, vote no on Prop 30, there's a good chance that a lot of people are going to start trending downward. So what do you think is the likelihood that this one's going to pass?
I'm actually very hopeful. It seems, and I don't recall if we covered this in the last episode where we went over propositions, but I know you've shed light on this, and I have as well. Um, Usually when it comes, so people are pretty gung ho when it comes to voting, like for candidates, but they seem to be a little bit more open minded and be willing to dive into nuances when it comes to ballot propositions. Um, so for example, like I was a little bit worried about, for the last election cycle with like the affirmative action. I really thought that somehow that was going to end up passing, and it ended up not. And so, you know, I kind of, so as far as like having that quote unquote radical language, the wealth tax is a little bit worrisome. But I do have hope, and then if Newsom is pumping money into it, I think it could help us too.
Yeah. And sometimes the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And in this case, the enemy of Prop 30 turns out to be Gavin Newsom. And so we're all on the same side. We're all one big, happy anti-tax family for now. But yeah, I think I think the more people dive into it, even though it doesn't affect a lot of people, it's always interesting to me because, like you said, propositions they're an odd thing in California. We had, I think it was 2 years ago, somebody pointed out this trend that while Californians vote for really radical left politicians, they vote pretty conservative on propositions. So when you take Republican and Democrat out of the out of the race, and you just say, here's a proposition, would you vote yes or no on it based on your principle? And more often than not, they kind of break conservatively. People vote against new taxes, people vote against new bonds. And in the end, it's like, I think it's interesting to see that there is kind of like a conservative desire out there. It's just people are not connecting that to politicians. So we have to go through everything through propositions. So I don't know. I think it's a 50-50 shot that this one loses. I hope it loses, just because any new taxes, I like to see when new taxes go down in flames. Every time they try and come after Prop 13, it always goes down in flames, which is always exciting to see. People are not going to let Prop 13 be knocked over. If you don't know what Prop 13 is, it's an old property tax proposition which protects it from being out of control. It's like the last thing that is protected in California is your property tax from not getting super crazy. And speaking of how people vote when there's not a Republican or Democrat, and this is one proposition that I'm really interested to see the breakdown when all is said and done and the dust settles. And I'm talking about Proposition 1, the constitutional right to reproductive freedom, legislative constitutional amendment. Now, this was proposed by the legislature. You can do that as a legislature. So there are different ways you can get a proposition on a ballot. The most popular way is somebody starts a ballot initiative. You have to go out. Everybody has to sign and send in a whole bunch of signatures. The other way they can do it is have the legislature put it on the ballot for people to decide, because there are some issues that the people have to decide under the California Constitution and the rules, the way it's set up. So this is one of those things that right after the Dobbs decision, which was the Supreme Court case that overturned Roe v. Wade, this was immediately proposed, voted on, and then placed on the ballot. So they don't need signatures. They don't need to go gather like 500,000 signatures. They just propose it and it goes on the ballot. But this is one that I'm going to be really interested to see the breakdown of how people vote on this. And specifically, I'm interested to see what groups vote yes or no on this, because I think that's going to be a really interesting glimpse into the minds of whether it's like the Asian community or the Latino community. How did they break on Prop 1 and the idea of giving basically unfettered abortion access to people in California? But let's go through some of the stuff that it says in our general election booklet, and we'll talk about it. And then some other stuff we can talk about. I found some good pastor quotes and what Newsom's doing with billboards, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So existing California laws provide that every individual has a fundamental right to privacy in their personal reproductive decisions, which includes the fundamental right to choose to have an abortion and the fundamental right to choose or refuse contraceptives. Due to a recent court case, I feel like that's grammatically incorrect. Right to abortion no longer protected by U.S. Constitution. In the past, the U.S. Supreme Court found that the U.S. Constitution generally protected the right to abortion. As a result, states had limited ability to place restrictions on abortions. However, in June 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that the U.S. Constitution does not protect the right to abortion. Correct. That's what they decided. They decided this was one of those things that they couldn't find a right specifically enshrined or written out in the Constitution. So they said this is something that has to be sent back to the state legislatures. This is a state by state basis. It has to go back to the localities. I know, very horrible and fascist that the Supreme Court basically said we don't have the power to carte blanche make a rule for the entire country out of thin air. They said we were wrong, which is also odd for something to hear out of Washington, D.C., that they were wrong. And they said, look, we're going to give up our power. You guys at the state level figure it out. Now, California already has an abortion law on the books. And a lot of this is fear mongering when people say, oh, they overturned Roe v. Wade, no one will be able to get an abortion. And, it's going to be like a Handmaid's Tale. Isn't it? That's my favorite. It's always going to be like the Handmaid's Tale. But there is an actual law on the books in California. It's Health and Safety Code 123466. It's a couple of them. It says the state may not deny or interfere with a woman's right to choose or obtain an abortion prior to viability of the fetus, or when the abortion is necessary to protect the life or health of the mother. So the key phrase here is fetus. So no late-term abortion. That's what the law says right now. And viability according to the statute, because as an attorney, I had to go in and look at the statute and see exactly what it says. Viability means the point in a pregnancy when, in the good faith medical judgment of a physician on the particular facts of the case before that physician, there's a reasonable likelihood of the fetus sustained survival outside the uterus without the application of extraordinary medical measures. Which, even then, I think that's a weird definition of the application of extraordinary medical measures, because you do hear these miraculous stories of someone being born prematurely, maybe like a month or two early. They do put them on respirators and incubators to help them survive. I guess you could call that extraordinary medical measures. So that would still be viability if the baby could live outside and they could still save it, which would then shorten the kind of the window of where you can get an abortion. But that's the law as is right now in California. You can get an abortion, can't get a late-term abortion. This, I think, changes everything. Goes on to say, for example, California law requires abortion providers to be licensed. In addition, abortions can only be performed on a viable fetus. We talked about that. Under state law, a fetus is considered viable if the fetus likely, we talked about that. Proposition 1 would change the California Constitution to say that the state cannot deny or interfere with a person's reproductive freedom, and that people have the fundamental right to choose whether or not to have an abortion, whether or not to use contraceptives. I don't think I ever heard, are we at a point in America where people aren't allowed to use contraceptives? Is that a thing? I feel like there's an abundance of choices for contraceptives in America. I don't know where this idea of like, if there's a state that's not letting you use contraceptives, I mean, put it in the chat or something, because I don't have any idea. In case you were wondering about the money, there's no direct fiscal effect because we don't know what Prop 1 is really going to do. Let's see. Oh, if the court finds that the proposition expands these rights in terms of reproductive rights, there could be fiscal effects to the state. Right, because they would be paying for Medi-Cal, Medicare, and all that stuff. Ready for the arguments? I'm sure you're interested to see what is the argument in favor of Prop 1.
Why, yes, I am.
The argument in favor of Prop 1 is screw them babies, because who cares? No, that's not actually the argument. For nearly 50 years, Americans have relied on the legal principles set by Roe v. Wade that allowed individuals to make their own reproductive health decisions privately. Access to abortion is no longer federally protected and is under attack across the country. It's under attack, Cynthia, just everywhere. Doctors, nurses, and health providers, all doctors, nurses, and all health providers everywhere in the state of California, they all agree. Yes, on Prop 1 is necessary to keep reproductive medical decisions where they belong, with individuals and their healthcare providers based on scientific facts, not political agendas. Isn't the whole purpose of this proposition sort of a political agenda, you could say? I mean, California already has a very lax abortion law.
Yeah.
There really is no reason to have this, other than they're just trying to score some points as for the Roe v. Wade crowd.
Yeah.
The California Medical Association, Planned Parenthood affiliates of California, and the League of Women Voters of California support Prop 1. Of course, Planned Parenthood supports it because they're going to be rolling in dough. Support Prop 1 because no matter who or what political party controls the government, a person's right to an abortion or contraceptive should be protected in California, which actually goes against the ruling in Dobbs. Because the ruling in Dobbs says this is something that should go to the people, and the people should decide on a case-by-case basis. If you live in a community where they say, hey, we're going to ban all sorts of abortions, any abortion, that's that community's choice. That's something that they have chosen. If you don't like that choice, you can move out of the community. There's a whole bunch of choices you could do. You could try to change it. You could get your own people elected. There's a whole bunch of things you can do. I'm not sure this is a fundamental right as much as they think it is. Let's see. And somebody had asked me before, they said, what's the difference between it being a law and being a constitutional right? Well, once it's a constitutional right under the California Constitution, it's going to be much harder to repeal and get rid of. So let's say in our ideal world, Cynthia, one day after all of our hard work and everything we're doing, California turns red. We have a legislature full of great Republicans and let's just say libertarians as well. The state has come to its senses. We're a free market state. We have a Republican governor for the first time in a long time. Republicans control the state of California and things are going to change. Now, they could come in and simply vote and get rid of this abortion law, as opposed to now there's a constitutional amendment which enshrines it. And they would have to put this repeal to the people to vote. Now, of course, if we ever got to that point where we've elected a state legislature that is entirely Republican, or let's say 70% Republican, like a supermajority, and a Republican governor, I would think California is probably pretty different at that point. But that's, I think, what they're trying to say here is that it does keep it a lot more secure than before, where you can easily change the law.
Yeah.
All right. Argument against Prop 1. Those of us signing this argument have different views on many issues, including abortion, but we all agree. Prop 1 is an extreme, expensive, and pointless waste of tax money that will allow unrestricted late-term abortions costing taxpayers millions. This is not the answer. Prop 1 was put on the ballot for one reason: to score political points, not to make serious policy. Prop 1 will allow late-term abortions at taxpayer expense without limitation for any reason at any time up to the moment of birth, even when the mother's life is not in danger, even when the healthy baby could survive it outside the womb. Instead of preserving our state's compassionate, carefully balanced limits, I don't even know if it's compassionate, carefully balanced limits on late-term abortions, Prop 1 will push California far outside the mainstream. Today, most states and 47 European countries limit late-term abortions. Remember how everybody on the left says we have to be a lot more like Europe? They just do everything so much better in Europe. They shouldn't look into their late-term abortion policies. A recent Harris poll found that 90% of Americans support limits on late-term abortions. Likewise, recent polling shows that most California voters support limitations on late-term abortions as well. The pro-abortion Guttmacher, Institute estimates that California could see a nearly 3,000 increase in the number of people from other states seeking abortions here, with many coming for more expensive late-term abortions. So that is the argument against Prop 1, according to Dr. Anne Marie Adams, who's a gynecologist, Tak Allen, president of International Faith-Based Coalition, and Assembly member Jim Patterson. All right. Prop 1. What are your thoughts, Cynthia?
Absolutely, positively no. So when the Dobbs decision came down, we actually did a live reaction to Newsom doing like a press conference, which was very fun. So if people watch the program, they would know that I'm very anti-abortion. I'm pro-life. So any kind of attempts to make things worse than they are for someone that cares about life, both for the mother and the child, automatically no, automatic red flag. So there's already that. The other aspect is when, as you've broken down, it is very, very extreme. So right now, as you have mentioned and illustrated, the existing law for California, and this is just the law, not like what's in the state constitution at the moment. California's restrictions on abortions is it's after the age of viability. So that's usually around like 23, 24, 25 weeks. So the language of this potential amendment to our state constitution would basically make abortion legal up until the moment of birth. So by definition, it is infanticide. So this, that's already, so for people that are trying to promote life and save lives, there's already like a huge apathetic thing that we deal with, as far as trying to tell people the truth, break down all different angles of it. So I understand, like, for example, sharing like the timeline of like when the heartbeat is there, when there's feet that grow. It's a very complicated thing when you talk about the science of it. This is pretty black and white. This is infanticide, as I mentioned. We would be in the same category as like a small minority of countries that have this, like North Korea and China. They do permit late-term abortion. This is even when the mother's life is not in danger, or when a baby after an abortion or whatnot, could still live. So California, if this passes, would be going in that direction. Um, it's really funny because, like, after the Dobbs decision, it's interesting just seeing all the breakdowns, right? One thing that's really insulting to me, one reaction that still gets me this day, is when Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, like, I was I was forced to watch this, but there would be interviews where she would be like exacerbated, like, I feel like my rights have been stripped away. I feel like I have less rights than my grandma and my mother. It's so insulting, honestly, for goodness sakes. Like, I don't know what's up with these people that, like, I don't know. Like, I grew up with strong women, and I don't, like, I just think that when people that are older than us had it tougher than us. So I just think just things like that are insulting. They just overreact and whatnot. So, anyways, long story short, this was a very easy decision for me. Out of all there's no nuances to be had. I think it's disgusting, and it's really appalling. I'm not surprised that after this happened, that all the Democrats and state legislators, they had their press releases ready to go, and they didn't waste any time. And to their credit, I mean, if Republicans were in power, I would expect them to do something, to own their power too, if that was my dream. But it is what it is. So also am curious about the breakdown too, because for even for like historically communities that tend to vote Democrat, they also tend to be socially conservative too, because they are religious, and people typically who are of faith, they, for some reason, this is like their one hill that they don't lean left. So I think it will be curious to know. I mean, if I had to guess, I don't. I think it will pass, but I want to be very hopeful of it because this is one that I'm very, very worried about. And I think we'd be going down a huge step in the wrong direction if it passes. So that's my answer. I would vote no, and I hope people vote no too.
Yeah, I mean, this is maybe we're far removed from that, but there was a time in California where we voted no on gay marriage.
Hmm.
Prop 8 did fail in the state, and that's, to some people, that was like extremely shocking to the rest of the nation. But that's also because people are genuinely just thinking there's a stereotype of everyone lives in LA and San Francisco, which is not true. And when you get out into the more rural areas, and when you get out any of those cities, California gets a lot more conservative and a lot more red. Um, and yeah, I am particularly interested because I think this could be one of those things that could be a catalyst. And the left has been pushing farther and farther left. And I think there's some old school Democrats who are, people like Bill Maher, I think of like old school Democrats, um, who are looking at the way the Democratic Party is going. And even he's going, whoa, 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 like, guys, you're going way too far, way too fast. Like, this is too much. You're even like turning me off. So I wonder how many people, like, this could be one of those political turning points in California where if it makes, I don't know, a good percentage of, let's say, Hispanics or Asians who are Democrat and they see this pass because Democrats wanted it, and they go, you know what? I'm just not on board anymore with Democrats. Is that an opportunity for like the California Republican Party to come in and go, hey, we don't support it. We don't think that's right. Uh, it could be a small political kind of turning point. I'm not going to say it's going to turn everybody red overnight, and all of a sudden everyone's going to go like, oh, we're all Republicans, and then we wake up in our dream fantasy where it's a completely red state like Arizona or something. Um, but I think it could have that effect, and I honestly think it could be one of those things that, like you said, it is a sticking point, and it is something where they go, if you're especially if you're Catholic, if you're Christian, this is something you're going to look at and go, I don't think I'm on board with this, and I think you've gone too far. And I think the left's continually pushing themselves farther and farther left, and they're going to push a lot of people out of their own party. And it could be better. It could be good news for California. Um, in the long run, it'll be bad news for us if it passes. I haven't honestly heard a lot of stuff about Prop 1, which is interesting. I haven't seen ads. I guess they figure in a state like California, they don't really have to run pro Prop 1 ads. Like, it's people will just see it, protects a woman's reproductive rights, and everyone's just going to check yes. But I also haven't seen a lot of like opposing Prop 1, which is interesting to me. I think there would have been more push to oppose this. Like, it seems like people gave up on this prop and figured it's passed before it even hit the ballot. So, have you seen anything against Prop 1 on TV or anything?
I have not, and that's interesting that you mentioned that because we laugh because we talk about Catherine Blakespeare's ads because that's the
Oh, jeez.
oh geez, she's she believes in the woman's right to choose and all that stuff, right? So kind of breaking down on the election side, the campaign side too. No, I haven't seen any ads promoting no, and that's quite unfortunate because Republicans are missing out on a great opportunity for it. However, I will say this though too, just because this is public, but there are some candidates, locally and then statewide that publicly, are on that side of things. They aren't pro life. They're more anti-abortion. Um, I've even have heard of a local San Diego candidate um, who's running for a local office here, and he actually supports Prop 1. So it's
Hmm.
also kind of interesting because, I feel like the Democrat campaign playbook has been, attacking how because someone by virtue is a Republican, they support it. it's a little conflicting for me because, again, like, I am someone that is against it, but it's also interesting how the Republicans kind of had that high ground because they're like, no, actually, we would probably agree on this and whatnot. So that's already interesting as is. The second thing is, even like a nationwide trend, it seems, I feel like a lot of Democrat candidates are harpooning on this and really relying on this to turn out their Democrat base because it's no surprise that people on both sides are incredibly unmotivated to vote at all.
Mm,
And it seemed, and the timing of it nationwide, the trend has been for Democrats to push this. I mean, for example, Joe Biden is in California and he's thumping for this. So they're
mm,
obviously, especially in California, doing everything possible to motivate their base. And so I think another trend that I think you and me would be curious to analyze is, yes, I think it'd be interesting to see the interest groups, the identity groups who are voting for this and what is the result of it. But I think it would be also interesting to note is how much it's actually going to motivate the Democrats. Because in the beginning, and I kind of had to stop kind of going down this rabbit hole just because it's kind of like, I just need to see what happens on election day, right? But I firmly believed in the beginning was I actually don't think it would motivate the Democrats as much as people think. I think that the economy, especially because we found out today too, we are going more towards a recession. We are officially at a 40-year high for inflation. I just strongly believe when people are struggling economically, there is nothing that trumps harder than what's hurting in your wallets. There's no social issue, there's no culture issue, like nothing's going to matter to people if they can't afford basic necessities and if they're pissed off at the gas station. And the thing with the economy too is it's not like when things are going downhill, it's not like it gets better. You have to go down for it to go up eventually.
mhm.
So like, if you asked this question 6 months ago, I would say, yeah, it's going to get worse. It's not going to get any better. And right now, if you look at Joe Biden's Twitter, I mean, he's talking about how he's added jobs. I think I saw that today on Twitter. They're trying to convert the messaging that they're doing everything that they can to make the economy better. And actually, the economy is proving, even though literally just today or yesterday, actually, yeah, it was today. I mean, the inflation's worse. So those are my thoughts on that. So yeah, I unfortunately have not seen the ads going against it. And one of our guests, Jonathan Zacharison, he was on too. So he's kind of betting because of the language of how extreme it is. He has a little bit more hope. So we'll just have to see what happens.
When President Biden comes out and says there's a chance we might head into a slight recession, for him to admit that a couple weeks before a midterm, uh, that signals to me that we're probably headed for a terrible recession. Because for the president to admit weeks before a midterm where his party is going to get wiped out that there's going to be a slight recession means they're probably looking at it going, ooh, things are really bad here. So yeah, and I agree with you. I think at the end of the day, I don't think people are as in politics, a month, 2 months, 3 months is like a lifetime. June was a long time ago. Roe v. Wade was a long time ago. You know what's not a long time ago? Waking up and seeing gas prices at 680. That was just like last week. So, and it's still above $6 in a lot of places. And here in San Diego, I see $6 everywhere. That's going to stick in people's minds at the end of the day. Like they're going to think about that and go, we have to change something in California because $6 gas is not good enough. And they're going to sit there and go, who cares about abortions when I can't afford to put food on the table or drive to work? Like that's not really my top priority or my top concern. Now maybe people will vote for it just because they want to feel good and they want a virtue signal. But I don't think it's as galvanizing. If Roe v. Wade happened in September, it would make a huge difference. But
Yes.
because it happened in June, it's a long time ago. And when it came out, everyone said, "Oh, this is going to doom the Republicans' chances for winning over Congress." And I thought to myself, I was like, Yeah, there's still a lot of time. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong between now and June. Um, there was a quote. So Southern California John MacArthur, he was a pretty adamant anti-COVID pastor. He was, I think he's the one who sued, and it went up to somewhere pretty far. I think it was the Supreme Court, um, and he won against that. But he wrote a letter to Gavin Newsom because Gavin Newsom, if you don't know, has been spending his campaign money not on actually campaigning in California, but putting up billboards and sending ads to other states. And most recently, he's put up an ad in Austin, Texas. And he's also put ads in Indiana, the one that says Indiana does not own your body. And there's another one that he tweeted out that says, need an abortion? California is ready to help. Learn more at abortion.ca.gov. And then below it, it has a quote, inspiring quote. Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment than these. Mark 12:31. And I'll let that sink in for everybody. That on a billboard that says need an abortion, Gavin Newsom puts scripture. Not just any scripture. This is the gospel we're talking about. This is Jesus speaking. If you were to look in your Bible and you open it up, some Bibles it's in red. This would be in red in your Bible. So Pastor John MacArthur wrote him a letter. In mid-September, you revealed to the entire nation how thoroughly rebellious against God you are when you sponsored billboards across America promoting the slaughter of children, whom he creates in the womb. Psalm 139, 13 through 16, Isaiah 45, 9 through 12. You further compounded the wickedness of that murderous campaign with a reprehensible act of gross blasphemy, quoting the very words of Jesus from Mark 12:31, as if you could somehow twist his meaning and arrogate his name in favor of butchering unborn infants. You use the name and the words of Christ to promote the credo of Moloch, Leviticus 20:1 through 5. It would be hard to imagine a greater sacrilege. So, definitely scathing rebuke by John MacArthur. And I agree with everything. I mean, I don't know who told him putting gospel and scripture on a billboard that has need an abortion, come to California on it. What are your thoughts, Cynthia? I have some more, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
The nerve.
The nerve is a good way to put it.
Yeah. It's it kind of reminds me when one of our amazing supervisors, Nathan Fletcher, like with the Awakened Church in San Diego, I remember hearing, Instagram lives of pastors sharing their experience because, Nathan Fletcher was obviously, the COVID-19 king with locking down businesses and churches and whatnot. And like I remember one of the pastors had shared that, Nathan had given some kind of like comment, like, basically, it was kind of one of those like backhanded like statements where, they talk about he was like, oh, I pray for those people, that were there, like, as I guess Awakened Church has like some cases and stuff. So it's like, it's another thing if like someone isn't particularly religious or open about their faith and whatnot, but like when I have a bone to pick with people that, aren't of that, and then they kind of like twist the hand of people who are of faith, kind of like slapping their faith in their face, is like the best way I would describe it. So I kind of had flashbacks to that. So it is disgusting, the nerve. I have really no words. It's really hilarious. It's like this man wants to run for president. He's doing a pretty poor job. Like I don't know if this is like his appeal to like maybe it's like it's weird. It's like he's so used to winning and now he's forced to like step out of like his comfort zone to try to cater in his messaging. And it's like, dude, you're so tone deaf. Like people are not like California, there's normal people that are saying that, don't vote the way that you do or think the way that you do. It's just really, it's astounding. Like, it really, his tone deaf is on full display.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's if he's trying to run for president, this is a piss poor way to do it, because sending these billboards with the words "need an abortion" and then also quoting the scripture in midwestern states like Indiana, it's not going to win you any favors. You're not definitely people aren't going to look at that and go, "Oh wow, Gavin Newsom, what a godly man. He really does care for his neighbor." I think a lot of people would look at that and go, "Excuse me, what the? Are you kidding me?" It would be like, I think it would be the same reaction you had, which is the nerve of him to say that. And I'm not sure why he picked one of, it's a great line, and it's definitely one of the most important. It's the golden rule. I'm not sure what the scripture has to do with needing an abortion, because it seems like if you should love each other as I have loved you, so go kill that baby. Like, that doesn't really make any sense to me. Or is he trying to say like California loves you to come kill that baby? Like, I'm trying to figure out what his logic is and why I mean, again, I doubt he's really gone to church and actually opened the Bible and like talked about this stuff. So I don't think he really has any idea. I think probably one of his interns was like, yeah, this one's really popular, so let's just put this one on the billboard. That sounds good. Um, so, and you're right. I always laugh at people on the left who try and use this idea of like, we're going to throw Christianity and your faith like back in your face. Like, oh, we're going to prove you're not a Christian. You should vote for socialism. Aren't you a Christian? Like, you should vote for socialism. Socialism is
Yeah.
what Jesus would want. And it's like, there was actually a funny TikTok I saw. I was going to send it to you. I'll send it to you after the podcast. But this girl is having like a conversation with herself, and one is the leftist and one's the one who's like actually studied the Bible. They're talking about how like Jesus was never a socialist, he was never a capitalist, he was never any of these things. He just said Christians should do good unto each other and to society, and that's our job and that's our duty. Um, but you always have the leftists who are like, you should vote for socialism because your Bible says so. No, it doesn't. You should allow us to have abortions because your Bible says you should love your neighbor. That's not what it says. So it's always interesting to hear leftists try and use scripture and the gospel to kind of own Christians, but they sound so ignorant. It's like, okay, um, why don't you pull out, the Quran and try and own Muslims who also don't believe in abortion? Muslims also don't believe in abortion. So where's the quoting of the Quran there? So
Yeah.
anyway, um, I hope it doesn't pass. I hope I think there's a lot of people who are praying it doesn't pass. I would say I'm praying that it doesn't pass. Probably will pass because it's California, but it's definitely one of the most controversial. And I do think it may be one of those political awakenings. It might be a spiritual awakening for a lot of people to see how far California is going on a lot of these social issues. And maybe that's a tipping point. Maybe it's a good tipping point if to get to this point where we go, it's gotten really bad here. And this is the stuff we're focusing on when gas is $6 a gallon and no one can afford food and electricity rates are through the roof and stuff like that. This is the stuff people are focused on. So who knows? Um, any final thoughts on Prop 1?
I mean, you make an interesting point, because like one of our previous podcasts where we go over Dan Fulkerson, we brought up the golden question, like how crazy it is that California still hasn't hit the lowest that it could. Like, there's people that genuinely think that it's fine, like it hasn't hit like rock bottom. So maybe I don't want it to pass. So on record, I don't want this to pass. FYI, I'm voting no, and everyone should vote no. But let's say it does. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Maybe we need, because you learn the most when you lose, right? So maybe this
Mm-hmm.
could be a good thing if it does pass. So we just need to see. But I am praying that it does not pass, and everyone should vote no. I am voting no. Phil is a no for this too. So everyone vote no, and let's pray it doesn't pass. That's all.
And we agree on both propositions, as opposed to the last episode where we didn't agree on both propositions. Well, actually,
And
we
we are
didn't agree
still,
on just on one. We didn't agree, but we did
yeah.
just agree on Prop 26. I'm still a yes on Prop 27.
Okay, cool. And guess what? We're still friends.
And we're still friends. We're still friends. Yeah. I think I made a comment on Karina's page about something, and she was like, "Nah, we don't agree." And I was like, "And we're still friends. We're not
Yeah.
going to kill each other over it. I'm not going to cut you off or block you or anything like that."
Yeah.
So, with that said, it's been a little over an hour. Thanks to everyone for signing on and listening to us talk about these two propositions. We got, I think there's several more, but they're not super controversial, I guess you could say. There's not that many left. There's one about dialysis, which, since I don't understand what the heck it's talking about, I always just vote no. There's the other one, which has to do with flavored tobacco. That's the referendum. So that is, if we can explain it real quick, there was a law passed that they were going to ban flavored tobacco, like in Juuls and stuff, and the vapes. So the referendum, now this is important. A referendum means you want to get rid of that law. Correct? So the referendum says, do you still support this law? It's kind of like the gas tax. This is where people got tripped up with the gas tax and why we still have a gas tax. It's going to say, yes, you still support the law. Would you like it to stay? And no, we do not support the law. And it's going to go away. So if you are someone who likes to vape and you like your flavored tobacco, then vote no. I think that's about it. I can't think of many other propositions. Can you? Let's see.
I don't have it open. Well, actually, let me just go exit really quick. So 1's abortion, 26 is gambling, 27 is the gambling. So we went over those three. 28 is education, requiring funding K through 12. 29 is the dialysis one. 30, we went over that. That's the wealth tax for emissions and wildfires. 31 is the referendum. So yeah. So the one we missed was 28 was requiring K through 12. So just really quickly, I'm voting no because they say that it's going to go funding for music education. Listen, we are 49th in the nation for reading and writing. Why don't we focus on writing? And I'm pretty skeptical. I'm pretty skeptical on, when they say that in general, like, oh, this funds is going to go where. I never believe them anyway. So I'm personally a no on that. But other than that, yeah, we've gone over everything.
That's it. It wasn't a really busy proposition season this year. Sometimes there's a lot of propositions. This year was not a lot of propositions. So with that said, that's all your proposition breakdowns. And we got a couple of weeks to go. I'm not going to be around next week. So we only have like one more week. And I think we're still on for the live stream. Are we still on for the live stream for the debate on the 23rd?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we'll get some other guests on as well to listen. We're going to do like the FDR. We're all going to huddle around the internet radio and listen with hot cocoa and stuff and listen to the debate on the radio, because that's where real people go watch debates between governors, is they go listen in front of the radio. Like that's how political debates happen in California. We still love having them on the radio. That's kind of a whole different thing. And I know we've asked Brian Dolly and why, he's not happy about that either. But anyway, we're going to do the live stream. We've got other episodes coming up. Hopefully we can get a couple more candidates in. And like I say, at the end of every show, if you like this show, you liked our breakdown, make sure you text it to at least one person. That's the best way to support the show, is just kind of spread the word about it. Also, make sure to subscribe, like, share, review, all that stuff for the video, and listen to us and subscribe to the audio podcast and all that stuff. And if you want this cool noodle shirt, you can find the link in my Instagram. So, and with that, we'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.